Hello, Duke fans, and welcome to episode 4 of the Duke Blue Central podcast. And yes, folks, it's been a while. Been a while since I jumped on to enjoy some conversation with you great Duke fans. Apologies for the long gap in between podcasts. Been getting pretty busy for me lately here in my personal life, but still feeling out how often to do this podcast. But apologies for the long break. Hopefully we won't have any breaks that long as we get closer and closer to basketball season starting, which is where the bulk of this podcast content stems from. Although, I'll tell you, I didn't have on my bingo card this year being this pumped up to watch some Duke football games on Saturdays like I have been this season. Going to talk about some of their awesome wins later in the show. But overall, again, thank you so much for listening. Appreciate all of you listening, all the nice comments, all the kind words over on Twitter at Duke Blue Central. Thank you guys for chiming in there. And yeah, let's get into this episode 4. So I kind of wanted to sit down and just go over some updates that have been happening within the Duke program throughout this past couple weeks. We might go most recent to, I guess, least recent. But we're going to start out with a commitment, a Duke basketball commitment that really surprised a lot of Duke fans and a lot of even the Duke reporters and the Duke recruiting guys who know all about Duke recruits. I think this one came out of left field. But Kon Knueppel, I think it's Knueppel. That shows you how little I know about this kid. He committed to Duke over the past couple days. 5-star recruit, very, very exciting kid to watch. Haven't done fully the research on him again because I felt like it was set in stone he was going to go to another school. But no, he committed to Duke over the past few days. Very exciting recruit to have. And when I was preparing some research to talk about this kid, a couple things jump off the sheet for you. He's a big kid, tall, lanky kid. But the number one thing that stands out about Kon is his shooting ability. I think I read a stat on 247 that said in the last spring he shot about 47% from three. So we're talking about an insanely good shooter here coming out of high school. Shoots the ball at an extremely high clip. I've listened to a lot of other podcasts, Duke podcasts and shows and YouTube videos about this kid, and they've got nothing but high marks for the guy. They're really excited about next year's team, especially, and this is a great point, but when you run him with alongside Darren Harris, who is another 2024 Duke recruit, you're looking at Duke potentially having the best 2 shooters in this upcoming recruiting class, both headed to the same school. That is going to be an explosive combo to pair with one other massive recruit that's still out there, but I believe is pretty strongly linked to Duke, which is one Cooper Flagg. I think this is the plan from John Shire, is to surround him with as many great shooters as we can. I think that's going to be a crazy good strategy to watch, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I can't imagine a team with Cooper Flagg dishing it out to the 2 top shooters in the class. And that leads me into another thing. And another great thing about this kid's commitment is we also don't know who is going to stay from this year's team. A lot of people are predicting both McCain and Foster coming back. Let's just say by some miracle, McCain plays awesome but doesn't play his way out of college in 1 year, comes back to Duke a second year. Imagine a lineup where it's McCain, Harris, and Knueppel on the same team. Those are 3 just absolutely lights out 3-point shooters that, nothing is for sure, no recruitment is for sure, but I think a lot of Duke fans feel really good about Cooper Flagg's chances to be at Duke next year. Imagining a lineup where we've got McCain, Harris, and Knueppel on the floor at one time, put the ball in Flagg's hands, let him drive, and kick out to any of those guys. I feel awesome about our chances there with that next year's team, with the shooting ability and with hopefully landing that Cooper Flagg commitment soon. Yeah, again, this was a really surprise commitment for a lot of Duke fans. A lot of the guys I follow on Twitter didn't see this coming. When Duke posted the classic Another One video, I had no idea who it was. I thought there was a small chance it was referring to Cooper Flagg, but I know he had just visited UConn right before, so started to laugh as if, Flagg was going to commit days after his UConn trip, but it was a Cooper Flagg, not just yet. It was Kon, and really excited about that. Anytime you can land a recruit like this that you really didn't feel like you had a chance to get, just makes it all that more exciting. I remember exactly where I was when Zion committed to Duke, because, that was one of those races where everybody thought it was Clemson. I can't remember exactly what the percentages were on that. I think it was about 85% he was committing to Clemson. He's from South Carolina. He was committing right after a Clemson game. It just lined up perfectly. And even if it wasn't Clemson, most people would have told you it was another school. And then all of a sudden, he pulls the Duke hat out under the table, and theories begin to spin, and really shook up the college basketball world then, and we didn't even know how good he was going to be then, and boy, did he continue to shock the college basketball world that following season at Duke. Exciting year, but I'm not saying Kon is going to be as good as Zion, but this commitment does kind of come out of nowhere, kind of like that one did. So excited to have him come into the squad next year. Need to do some more research on this guy. Need to watch some more film on this guy. He looks like a Virginia lock. I think that's where most people pegged him as going. I'd say most people thought he was going to Virginia, but even after that, I think Alabama was a big school that was going after them. And any school like Alabama, with the football program that they have, is going to be able to pay a lot of NIL money, which is why I think you're seeing some of these football schools really make an impact in recruiting in basketball. And I do think it's a challenge that Duke is going to have to overcome. At least, well, who knows, maybe our football program will get just as high as our basketball program here in just a couple of years. But at least for now, where Duke football is not pulling in the money that Alabama football is, I do think it's going to be a challenge for them in the future, just with the amount of money that these other schools are going to be able to pay for Duke to keep up. It's going to be interesting to watch. I do think there's a lot to be said for guys wanting to play at Duke where they feel like their chances are, if you go to Duke, your chances of success in the NBA, I just feel like drastically go up. I think, there are other schools out there who can say the same. Certainly, as much as I dislike Kentucky, they can also make a claim that, look, if you go to our school, your chances at the next level to succeed go up. And Duke is one of those places, so I feel like that outweighs any NIL money you can offer a kid. But I'm not going to deny, if you're 18 coming out of high school and one school's offering you, $50,000 more than another school, that's a ton of money for you at that age. So, it could even get into the millions more. We don't even really know what those NIL numbers are. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Duke recruits in the future with those. But no, he turned down the bag from Alabama to come play at Duke. Right decision, Kon. We welcome you into the Duke Brotherhood. It is going to be exciting to watch him play. To me, this just screams classic Jon Scheyer recruit for the future. I think just this reeks of exactly the type of guy that Scheyer wants to go after. I think he's, we're still going after the big names. Cooper Flagg has been the most hyped Duke offer recruit for however many years, but we're still going after some of those guys. But we've seen Jon really stress. I think this year's recruiting class is a perfect example of that. We've seen Jon really stress going after those kind of 15 to 20 ranked guys that are 5 stars, maybe on some sites border 4 stars, but that have a chance to stay for a sophomore season. I think that's totally realistic to expect that Kon is going to stay for his sophomore season. A lot of the scouting reports that I've read on him don't have him pegged as a first round or maybe even a draft pick in the following year's NBA draft. And this is just the example prospect that I think Duke is going after for the future. These kind of 10 to 20 guys, 15 to 20 guys that are great, have a lot of potential, maybe not as talented immediately as those top guys, but guys that we really think can stick around for a second year. I think Kon will stick around for 2 years or more. Always you'd love to see them just ultra perform in their freshman year and maybe have a chance to go, but selfishly, I hope that he's staying for more than 1 year, and I think that's probably probably the expectation is that he's at least a 2-year player at Duke. I think a lot of our recruits moving forward we're kind of planning on them to stay that one extra year and then leave. This year, I think Proctor, Mitchell, Flip all have the expectation that they're going to be leaving at the end of the year. And I think maybe they even knew that coming into it last year, that these were going to be 2-year players and then you head out. I think Kon could have have a similar mindset going into his college career at Duke. But yeah, this just reeks Jon Scheyer recruiting to me. I think he's the perfect guy to fit our system. Excited to watch him play. Yeah, so that's kind of all I got on Kon. I need to do more research on the kid, to be honest. I don't know. I had to look him up when he committed. I fancy myself as a guy who's semi up to date with Duke recruiting. But man, this one just shocked everybody. But that's exciting to hear that. So the next topic I kind of want to talk about on this episode is the ACC realignment. Conference realignment has been something that's been talked to death over these past few weeks, with the Pac-12 essentially disappearing overnight. Schools joining the Big Ten, schools joining the ACC. But yeah, in case you haven't heard, it's hard to believe if you hadn't, ACC did add 3 schools to its roster starting next year. They added Cal, Stanford, and SMU. So I guess everybody's saying we're the all-coast conference now instead of the Atlantic Coast. Cal, Stanford, SMU. Those are the 3 new ACC schools that we picked up. It's going to be interesting to watch them function within the ACC. Everybody's got a different take on this. I've listened to so many podcasts and YouTube videos and just sports media personalities' takes on all this conference realignment, and it's impossible to really get down to what's the right decision to make here. I mean, there's just so many factors that we don't know about, so many big money decisions that schools have to make. But I thought Jon Scheyer made a good point on the Brotherhood podcast. Actually, take a listen to that if you haven't, hosted by Ryan Young. Great stuff there. He interviewed Coach Scheyer and asked him about this, and I thought he had a great response to it, in that, look, whatever your opinion is about conference realignment is, standing still was not the move to make. Those aren't his exact words, but that was the point he was making. Standing still is not the point, not the move to make. And I totally agree with that. I don't know how I feel about Cal, Stanford, and SMU joining the ACC. You don't really mind it as much for football. I know, these football programs get treated really well. They're flying charter flights and everything. I'm more concerned about sports like basketball, and then your other sports, your nonprofit sports, your swimming, your gymnastics. I know nobody talks about those as much in college athletics, but those are important to colleges, and it's going to be interesting to see how those guys travel across country way more often than they are now. And this really hurts. Everybody's talking about it from, a Duke perspective, a Carolina perspective, and things like that. The schools that this is toughest on is Cal, Stanford, and SMU. Duke is going to have to go over there. They can probably schedule it where, you play Cal and Stanford in consecutive weeks. You can maybe stay over there the whole time. But the schools that are really going to struggle with this are the 3 new schools. They're the ones that are going to have to constantly be flying over to the East Coast, staying over there and playing all their games there. Have no idea what this is going to look like from an athletic student perspective. This has the potential to really hurt some of the guys' academic standings. I know nobody likes to talk about that in college sports, but most of these guys aren't going to go on to play at the next level, certainly when you're talking about football and other sports. So them getting a degree is a really important aspect while they're there in college, and it's going to be really interesting to see how this helps or hurts the ACC's academic standards that they seem to really, really want to have. All these schools are really good academic schools, so you can see kind of why they went after them. But it's going to be fascinating to see. I think another factor in this too is, and these are takes that have all listened, another good podcast that I listened to kind of help form my opinion on this was the DBR, Duke Basketball Roundup podcast. Highly recommend you listen to those guys. They're great. I try to catch every episode they put out. But they made a good point on there that the ACC right now has a TV deal with ESPN, and I believe in one of the parameters of the deal is that there needs to be, I think, 14 teams in the conference. So, if you wake up one day and Carolina and Florida State and Clemson want to leave, you're in drastic danger of dipping below that 14-team mark, and then all of a sudden you lose your TV deal, which cuts a massive amount of money going to the ACC. And that's essentially what happened to the Pac-12 is they lost a certain number of schools, which got them booted out of their TV deal, which lost them a ton of money, eventually to the point where they didn't feel like they could continue as a conference. So I think the ACC sees that and says, hey, if nothing else, let's get these schools in here as a backup in case these other schools leave, so that ESPN has to honor their current contract with the ACC. And when you look at it like that, I just think they had to add some schools. And whether you like Cal, SMU, and Stanford a lot, I just think standing still and doing nothing wasn't the right play here. At least take a shot, see what these schools can do for the ACC. Another thing I've heard is that SMU essentially was free to add. Like, I don't think they're taking any of the TV money because they're kind of getting upgraded into the ACC. I think as part of that deal, the ACC has to pay them almost nothing, and they're getting more security with their ESPN TV deal. So that probably a good financial move right off the bat for the ACC. But there's so many takes on this. Who knows where conference realignment is going to lead? Are we heading towards two super conferences where it's the Big Ten and the SEC and that's it? Personally, I'll tell you what I'd love to see. Now, this is never going to happen because basketball just doesn't make near the amounts of money that football does. If you look at the numbers, are staggering on that. I know, here at Duke, we're a Duke basketball podcast, so we love Duke basketball more than just about any other sport, but more than any other sport. But the amount of money that college football makes is just astronomical, even when compared with something as popular as Duke basketball. So that's where the money is. But what I'd love to see the ACC just go all in on basketball and add like UConn and Villanova, and just kind of admit that we're not a football conference, at least right now, and just go full out basketball. Can you imagine those like conference games against UConn and Villanova? And they kind of fit the model of an ACC school. They're East Coast and good academic schools. Like, man, I can't imagine like a better fit when it would come to basketball than adding those two schools to the conference. It would drastically change the ACC basketball landscape. I would just love to see that personally. But yeah, I mean, that's so pretty far-fetched from happening. I don't think the ACC is willing to just sell out and go full basketball conference. Although personally, for my viewing pleasure, that's what I would like to see. So there are a ton of takes out there on conference realignment and what it's going to mean for everybody. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it. I just don't think standing still. I don't think the ACC can afford to just add nobody. So I think this was just a move to just get some schools, get some high quality schools, and especially when you look at other sports too. Other than football and basketball, once again, nobody likes to talk about those. But when you look at Olympic level sports, Cal and Stanford are I think the two probably most elite schools when you talk about Olympic athletes and things like that. Like, that's a big deal. I know it's not a big money maker for schools, but I don't know about you guys, but I really enjoy watching the Olympics, and as much as Team USA can dominate, that's who I root for. So it was important that these schools didn't get left behind in the dust with all this conference realignment. So in that sense, I'm really happy to see Cal and Stanford in the ACC. But yeah, once again, I think the ACC had to make a move. This was a move to get some high academic value schools that are pretty good all around in athletics, and a move to further secure their ESPN TV deal. Yeah, and last but not least, big topic on this episode I want to cover is just the recap of Duke football season. I didn't think I'd be sitting here talking about Duke football. I knew they were going to be pretty good this year. I felt like they had a chance to be preseason ranked going into the year. That didn't happen. Probably should have happened looking back on it now, but kind of a recap of their year. And of course, super late to this party, but Of course, it started out with their massive win against Clemson at home at Wade Wallace Stadium. Just an insane game. I listened on the radio. I was coming back from a road trip for the first part of the game, listening to it on the radio, and then about probably midway through the first half, I got home and was able to watch the rest of the game on the TV. But even just listening to it on the radio, the atmosphere, you could just tell, was so electric in the stadium. And I'm going to be honest here, just as a maybe pessimistic fan sometimes, when I think it was Calhoun muffed the punt and Clemson was able to score, I was almost ready to give up on the game then. I'll freely admit that. I'm more optimistic now, thank goodness. But gosh, it's just when you give up a play like that to a team like Clemson, they were ranked number 9 at the point. This is a top 10 preseason team we're talking about. And you give up a muff punt that turns into a touchdown, you just feel like this is going to be a game where Duke is plays really hard, but that one mistake just comes back to bite you and you lose the game. And little did I know that was the only points that Clemson was going to score the entire game. Such an insane, it just felt like every time Clemson had something going, fumble or interception or blocked kick. And part of that is on Clemson just messing up and giving the game away. But I think a huge part of that is credit to the Duke defense, and that's been apparent for the rest of the season as well. This Duke defense is for real. The Duke defensive line is for real, able to get pressure. The Duke secondary cornerbacks, safeties are awesome. Interceptions galore back there. Just incredible job of Mike Elko getting this defense ready for this season. And then you go on the offensive side of the ball, and everybody talks about, and it's to his credit, everybody talks about Riley Leonard, and everybody talks about Waters too, the starting running back for the Blue Devils. Those guys are I think everybody expected Riley Leonard to be great this year, but especially Waters, I think, has had a great start to the season. He is, to me, one of the best running backs that I've watched in all of college football to start this season. I've really enjoyed watching him run, but I really think the difference maker on that Duke offensive side of the ball is the offensive line, man. They've been awesome. Clemson, of course, the type of recruits that they're going to have a good D-line. They're going to get studs rushing, 5-star guys rushing off the edge. And, yeah, they were able to pressure Riley Leonard a fair amount. But, man, the Duke offensive line has just held up in every game. And even that one they held up. But in every game since then, it has just been – they have been dialed in, and our quarterbacks have just had plenty of time to throw. I say quarterbacks because, there was one game in there where we put in the backup, and he went 7 for 7, had about 150 yards and 7 throws, and looked awesome doing it, by the way. I can't remember the kid's name at the moment, but, man, I'm excited to watch him play next year. They were saying on the broadcast that the coaching staff feels that he even might have a better pure throwing arm than Riley Leonard does. And I could see it out there, man. Leonard's electric in so many other ways, so obviously he's the starter. But this backup's special. I don't think Duke's going anywhere next year with him at the helm. It's gonna be fun to watch him. He was making some throws out there that I don't see Riley make. But yeah, the Duke offensive line, I don't think can get enough praise. And they are old. I think all of them are graduate students except one who's a senior. Not often do you have a group of players where a senior is the youngin out there with the rest of them. So it's been awesome to watch the line. They just bully everyone that they've played so far. And again, this leads us to now, maybe, is it crazy to say that this weekend's game could potentially be one of the biggest games in Duke football history, with College Game Day coming into town, first time ever in Durham. I mean, who would have thought we're sitting here, we're going to see game day at Durham? Lee Corsa's already picking Duke, by the way. There's no way he's picking the Irish. I'm telling you right now, on Saturday morning when we tune in, he's going to have that Blue Devil head on. Before the end of the evening, he will have that Blue Devil head on. I feel so strongly. I feel like he's going to pick Duke in this. just to get the fans, and they've never been to Durham. That's going to be so exciting to watch. But I can't believe Duke is getting a game day. I mean, I know that doesn't seem like a big deal, and it's not when you actually look at the players on the field and the guys who play the game, but it's a huge deal for marketing and exposure. Like, this is a massive opportunity for the Duke fans to show out. I'm hearing that the game is already sold out. It should be the most electric game that Wade Wallace has ever seen. There should be people there from the morning at game day. I know that there will. The crazies will be out there. But just an awesome time for Duke football to be in the spotlight of college football for the week. It's the best game that's going on that weekend. I think the only other ranked matchup, I think Ole Miss is playing somebody. I can't remember who at the moment. But other than that, this Duke Notre Dame game is the biggest game of the day. And I even think it trumps whoever Ole Miss is playing. We're talking about a Notre Dame team who, heartbreaking loss to Ohio State, by the way. I got to watch almost the whole second half of that game, and man, they had it wrapped up, I thought, and just heartbreaking loss to Ohio State. We're talking about Ohio State, top 4 team in the nation, probably. They just got put at 4, I think, by the AP poll. We're talking about a Notre Dame team that went toe-to-toe with them, that is now going to be coming into Duke to play them in the next following game. I just could not be more pumped for this game. It one of the biggest games this football program has ever seen, with game day coming into town and just the matchup itself. You're talking about an undefeated Duke team, ranked 17 in the AP poll this week. And, man, I'll tell you, don't let us beat Notre Dame on Saturday. Do not let us beat Notre Dame on Saturday. If we beat Notre Dame in maybe the biggest game, it's already a win. I'm already chalking this game up as a win, whatever happens on the field, because it's just the exposure Duke football is getting and the respect that we're getting as a program compared to the previous years, and the praise that Mike Elko is getting after just 2 years of being at this program, being at this school. This is already a win for Duke football, just to have this game happen in the way that it's happening. But, man, don't let us come out and win that game, because you are not going to hear the end of it from Duke fans, myself included. I am so hyped about the potential of us walking away with a win against Notre Dame. I mean, at what point, if we walk out and beat Notre Dame, at what point do we start talking about, like, do we get in the top 10? Is this Duke football team a top 10 school in the nation? And then you go on, you look at the rest of their schedule, a couple other big games coming up. Then you look on saying, hey, maybe we can go in and beat Florida State. Maybe we can go in, and I think we already have a shot against Carolina, but maybe we can go in and beat Carolina. You start talking about an ACC title for this team in Mike Elko's second year under the helm. It just, oh, man. A lot of implications for this weekend's game. Everybody tune into that. I think it's a 7:30 game to night game. I mean, this is the game that college football fans are going to be watching this weekend. And we had the same thing against Clemson with it happening on a Monday. Every fan of college football was watching that game. And I think it's going to be similar this weekend against Notre Dame. Hey, we won the first big primetime matchup of the year. Let's hope Duke can walk away with the second. I feel okay about our chances. It's hard to say. I think Notre Dame is better than Clemson, but I'm going to be honest. I still don't think Clemson is a bad team. I know they lost again this past weekend against Florida State. I still don't think this Clemson team is just awful. I think they're not as good as they were in previous years, and I think their big problem has been a lack of just superstars at the wide receiver position and really the quarterback position as well, even though I don't hate Klubnik, but he's not a superstar that they've had in previous years. And again, I don't think they have that other than Shipley, who is a phenomenal player, and even the backup running back, Maffa. They don't have superstar weapons at the receiver position and the tight end position, slot receiver position that they have had in previous years. But this team is still a good team. Duke, we beat them 28-7. So I feel okay about our chances at Notre Dame. Big thing, obviously, everybody's going to be talking about Hartman versus Leonard. Sam Hartman versus Riley Leonard. What a great quarterback battle. Man, going to be an exciting game. I kind of don't know what to predict, what to think going into it. I don't think Duke has played a team that compares to the level of talent we're going to see with Notre Dame. We've kind of had blowout wins. Even when you think about 28-7, I mean, Duke has kind of had blowout wins in all of their games this season. So I definitely think we're going to see the closest Duke football matchup of the year. But man, I don't know what to think going into it. I know Notre Dame will be the favorite, but man, don't count us out. And if Duke wins that game, we really start to talk about how good this team can be this year. Can we contend for an ACC title this year? Which is, thought we were going to be good, but I was telling everybody preseason about Duke football is like, I think there was a potential we could have a better team than last year's team and still have a worse record just because of the absolutely brutal schedule we had. Last year we got a lot of layups and softies, came out to a really good record at the end, but this year there were not a lot of easy games on that schedule, especially now that we're getting into conference play and everything. It's a grueling schedule, and it's a tough schedule after this too. I mean, even if you walk away with this game, still a lot of tough games on the schedule. But man, you couldn't be happier as a Duke football fan of where you're at right now. You feeling like you got a real shot at taking out this Notre Dame team who's ranked as high as 9 last week. Man, what a time to be a Duke football fan. What a time to be a Duke fan overall. But yeah, okay, it's been great. It's been great talking with you guys. Thanks so much for your patience. Sorry once again for the long gap in between episodes. I think next episode we're going to get back to purely Duke basketball. I recently took part in an article from the Duke Wisdom Network. Shout out to Duke Wisdom, by the way. Big fan of him over there. I get the privilege of being a part of their network and their network of writers. Haven't put out an article yet, but hopefully we can get into that soon as well. But had the privilege of participating in kind of a survey for him and that website. Check it out if you haven't. Just search Duke Wisdom up on Twitter. You'll find it linked there, of where me and several other Duke writers and I guess social media guys ranked the top 15, ranked every player on Duke's basketball's roster this upcoming year and kind of averaged them into one conglomerate score. I'd love to go over my personal rankings with you and then compare them to other people's rankings to see kind of where I land compared to everyone else on thinking of which players are going to be best for this upcoming basketball season. Yeah, I feel like I was pretty in the norm, pretty in the average answers, but there were some outliers there where I had some disagreements with some of the rankings. So I think next episode we're going to go over that, but I wanted to break it up a little bit. Been talking a lot about next year's team, next year's roster. Wanted to break it up with this episode, talk a little bit about recruiting, conference realignment, and Duke football. So yeah, it's been a great episode with you guys. Appreciate you all for listening. Thanks for tuning in so much to Duke Blue Central episode 4. You can find me on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't bother me. Just search Duke Blue Central on there. If you want to help out this show, the best thing you can do is give it a rating and maybe give it a share to someone you think would like listening to all things Duke basketball. I guess Duke football today too, but thanks so much for listening. Appreciate every single one of you. And last but not least, go Blue Devils.